All right, so this is our presentation on the styles of effective listening, the talk show.
By
Raylan,
Alyssa,
and Alicia. We're going to talk about the 5 styles of effective listening. We have empathy and objective, non-judgmental and critical, surface and depth, polite and impolite, active and inactive.
All right, so we have empathetic, and objective listening, thinking and feeling. Feel with others to see the world as they see it and the way they feel it. You express and understand what the person means when they are talking. You express your ability to feel what the other person is feeling. You are paying attention to another person with empathy. You show compassion and identification with the person, and you're actively listening to what they are trying to tell you and speak to you, and you repeat back to the person what you think he or she said to make certain you understand what they are saying.
So we found actually a video from the Ellen Show that interviewed Coach Cal, who was actually a Canadian hockey fan who went viral for his heartfelt pregame speeches to the entire team that gained national attention. So within that video, there were a couple different examples of objective listening and also empathetic listening. In turn, some of the examples were that they both focused on verbal and nonverbal messages, where Cal states the reason he loves to give his speeches comes from a place of encouragement for what others believe in themselves, so they manifest and make them come true. Examples of relational messages is when Cal directs his speech toward his message to the team and how it relates to his words to Ellen, and it all comes back to the being positive and uplifting others along your journey. Another example where they did make special notes of statements that refer back to the speaker is when Ellen has speakers often repeats his words and confirms that she understands the message he's trying to convey to her and the audience.
The next one that we're going to talk about is non-judgmental and critical thinking. With this, you listen non-judgmentally, you have an open mind and what the other person is talking about. You have different views on what the person's talking about. You go beyond hearing the words that they're being spoken to. You process what you're being told. You really don't form an opinion right away. You wait until the person's done talking. You make sure that the person is feeling valued, and then you just act like you're interested in the conversation. You make sure you're polite, listening to whatever they are talking about.
Some examples of non-judgmental and critical listening. We had a discussion from The Real about baggage and the things that they had experienced were traumatizing to them, and they could never let them go. Some examples are to listen to the entire conversation and avoid highlighting certain items from what you have to say so that they can fully understand and include each and every component. An example where they did not focus on both verbal and nonverbal messages was when they focus on both as each person delivers their story of baggage. They not only all take in each word that is said with a nonverbal response as the story was told. Example where they did not for both content and relational messages. The entire clip is the conversation of baggage that is bounced between each story. They listen to each other while the story is being told and are able to hold conversation about why, and then move to the next person who has a story that relates to the topic that they may be talking about. An example that they did not make special note of statements that refer back to the speaker. They didn't openly refer back to each other's stories, but they told their own story that relates to the conversation, showing that other people can relate. An example where they did not regard the literal meaning of messages is there isn't a direct time in the clip where they revisit any of the topics to clarify or relate to it, but other than tell their own stories to convey their understanding for one another's baggage.
So up next we have surface and depth listening. This would be engaging in depth listening. They make special notes so you can refer back to the speaker. They have a literal reading of the words and sentences. They listen for both content and relational messages, and they focus on both verbal and nonverbal messages. It's kind of like a balance between listening on the surface and underlying meanings within the message.
Examples of this surface and depth listening. A couple things go live with Jenny Allen, a famous author, on the topic of making friends and developing deeper relationships and the lessons learned throughout her experience. You can see that we also connected the YouTube video, so you can please refer to that. Example of surface and depth listenings. The first one is this takes place when you listen to a conversation and understanding the meaning, but depth takes place when you listen to what they have to say and find the deeper meaning on a common experience or a relationship to the story. Another example where they did not focus on both verbal and nonverbal messages. They focus on both throughout the hour-long conversation. They discuss cues between the people as far as people who are approachable through body language, and even referred to Sean's in the video. Another example where they did not listen to both content and relationship message. Throughout both parties in the podcast go back and forth with speaking to each other and in turn validating their understanding for one another with how they relate to each other. Another example where they did not make special notes of statements that refer back to the speaker. Both parties actually do refer back to earlier statements or even previous podcasts in regards to who they are friends with and betrayal between two friendships and their past statements about betrayal in other videos. And then our last example for this one, where they did not discard the literal meaning of messages. So when Zach initiated the conversation of cereal, stating cereal starting 3:30 through 4:38, he discussed that being good at anything but being successful because he's a cereal starter. She responds to this by relating to having the same relation, and once you start and find out who's good at what task, you then step back and let the work happen.
All right, next we have polite and impolite listening. Polite listening, you are avoiding interrupting the speaker and giving them positive feedback. Supportive listening cues, express politeness through listening behaviors. You're making eye contact with them. Nodding gestures to make sure that to show them that you are listening. Impolite listening is interrupting the person speaking while they're doing something or having a conversation with someone. Falling asleep during a conversation is another impolite listening. Changing the conversation topic, using your cell phone while in the middle of a conversation, causing a distraction when someone is talking to you or whatnot.
So we actually found a video of polite and impolite listening where the two actors are playing out the part of someone reading the newspaper and the other is trying to interrupt him by getting his attention. She didn't call him by his name, but just said, "Hey, you," over and over and over again. So some examples of polite listening are making eye contact, letting the person finish talking before you ask any questions, or in this case, finish reading the newspaper. And then some examples of impolite listening are yelling at someone who's in the middle of talking to someone else or in the middle of doing a task that they shouldn't be interrupted while doing, or even not allowing other distractions from keeping you intrigued in a conversation with someone, such as like other people around you listening into their conversations rather than the conversation that you're having with the person right in front of you, so to say. And then in this actual video, they didn't make eye contact when talking. Once in the first section in the video, the guy realized that she had been interrupting her and to express other ways in which she could have been polite. At the very beginning of the video, in the first section, he was in the middle of reading the newspaper and not listening for any content or relational messages from anyone. In the second section, he's very polite with the guy and uses words like "excuse me, sir," and "pardon me" to see if he was done reading the sports section of the newspaper. The guy expressed to the girl that there are better ways to walk up to someone if you want to converse with them. If you're going to be interrupting someone, you should also remember why you did so instead of interrupting them and then forgetting what you were initially trying to get out of them. And lastly, an example of disregarding the literal message would have been in the first section when the guy was repeating what the girl was saying to him to interrupt him, and it was just flat out rude.
The last one, right? Active and inactive listening. Active, you retain information, you ask questions, you express your understanding of the speaker's feelings. The 3 A's of active listening. You have attitude, attention, and adjustment. For inactive listening, you tune out what the talker or who the person who is talking to you. You recklessly interject irrelevant comments into the conversation. You have no comments after the person is done talking, and you simply just do not care what the person is talking about.
All right, and some examples of active and inactive listening. We used an example with a YouTube video, and it's from Everybody Loves Raymond. And they sit down to have a conversation with their daughter about her recent actions, and they try to understand what she needed from them to help with her actions to make them better. Some examples of active listening. We have paraphrasing to show understanding and using brief verbal affirmations. Some examples of inactive listening. We have not actively responding to the conversation, like ignoring or just flat out not listening in general. Often looking away during conversation or paying attention to their surroundings more than the conversation at hand. Some examples where they did not focus on both verbal and nonverbal messages. They focused on both verbal and nonverbal messages as Raymond shook his head yes while he had a conversation with her daughter about her feelings and actively asked questions about why she doesn't like the other boys. Some examples where they did not listen for both content and relational messages. They listened to all of her statements about feelings as though nobody pays attention to her, which is why she ripped apart the stuffed animal. She just felt like no one was listening to her. Some examples where they did not make special note of statements that refer back to the speaker. Throughout the conversation, they repeat a lot of what she says and interrupt her words with more questions to truly understand her feelings about not being paid attention to and acting out the way she did. An example where they did not disregard the literal meaning of messages. They took all of her responses for exactly what she conveyed them as and even repeated her language to confirm how she felt about it. So, yeah.
This is our presentation, and then we've also done the outline, and we will be uploading the outline with our presentation as well.
Thanks for watching.